Warning: this video will contain spoilers for some of the indie games mentioned throughout the video, particularly Bendy and the Ink Machine and the Five Nights at Freddy's series. Over the last few years, the landscape of indie horror games has changed drastically. Solo developers going on to produce modern-day horror icons, seemingly complex stories told across multiple game entries, and communities forming to discuss and solve mysteries in these games. But where is this all heading? How is this newfound status quo going to change the landscape of the horror indie game genre? What are the glaring issues that this genre faces? That, guys, is what I'd like to talk to you about today. With the popularity of the game Poppy Playtime by Mob Games, I've noticed a sort of formula really beginning to rise to the surface when it comes to the storytelling and gameplay in these indie horror games. To my knowledge, I think this emerging formula originated all the way back in 2014 with the release of Five Nights at Freddy's. The iconic characters, the unsettling atmosphere, the eerie story alluded to in Phone Guy's calls and the posters on the office wall, and the threat of a heart-stopping jump scare. FNAF defined a new genre in the indie horror landscape, what I've heard several others refer to as the mascot horror genre. Iconic antagonists, plus secretive lore, usually involving a tragedy, plus unsettling abandoned environment, plus jump scares equals the formula for a popular mascot horror game. Take this and apply it to games like Poppy Playtime, Bendy and the Ink Machine, or Hello Neighbor. Even games like Hello Puppets, My Friendly Neighborhood, and even Big Larry fall into this formula. The genre has taken off so far as to even make it into film and TV, in titles such as Willy's Wonderland, the Banana Splits movie from 2019, and the short film The Hug, but that is a topic for another day. I want to make it clear here, I'm not looking to bash these games or developers. I love these franchises and games, and as an aspiring game developer myself, I have a lot of respect and admiration for these developers. But I see certain patterns emerging I hadn't really noticed before, and that I really want future developers to avoid for the sake of their games and the community. The major issues I've seen with these popular indie horror games all comes down to their planning before development, particularly with the story crafting. I think these games saw how FNAF had this complex, massively popular lore behind it that was exciting and brought communities together, and they wanted to share in that with their own creations. But with this desire to make an immersive world, I think that many of these developers got too caught up in popular fan theories and still wanting to have that same shock factor their games may have initially had in first installments or titles. Recently, Game Theory released a video talking about if theories were changing the stories of these games, particularly Bendy and Hello Neighbor. Overall, this video suggests that it is true that theories did have some effect on these games. However, we will likely never know how much of an impact. I fear that it's entirely possible that these games had totally different stories, but to keep that shock factor, we're afraid to confirm that these theories were in fact the true, originally intended story. This is not entirely out of the realm of possibility in the creative media field. Josh Nolan, creator of HBO series Westworld, said in an interview, "Reddit has already figured out the third episode twist, so we're changing that right now." While many speculate that he was being sarcastic, I can see why a creator would decide to do this, to avert expectations and have the same shock or surprise factor as their series once had with fans. In his interview with Dawko, Scott Cawthon mentions wanting to make Five Nights at Freddy's 4 scary again.
And so then that kind of, in my mind, that wouldn't let the series rest in a way, because I wanted to make another entry that was really, really scary again.
I think it clearly gets harder the longer a series goes on, having to always think of new ways to present your story and to do it in a way that fans get maximum value out of. I personally hope that the developers of these games have not completely changed their stories last minute. It is really rewarding for theorists to be confirmed right, and developers to tell the stories that they want to tell. It is a storytelling talent to be able to foreshadow certain parts of your story, even if people guess what is going to happen, and deliver what was foreshadowed. For example, I had honestly expected Bendy and the Ink Machine to end completely different than it did. A popular theory around chapter 2 or 3 was that the employees had been turned into ink creatures and that your character, Henry, was going to be the reincarnation of the true Bendy, while his corrupt business partner was the inky demon Bendy. While there isn't really anything to confirm that this was the real story behind the game, many people thought it would be based on other clues throughout the game, and there were many popular theories online at the time. Instead, the ending we got was a bit confusing, and many thought it was a little lackluster for what the game had seemingly been building up. Again, I just really hope Kindly Beast was not afraid or worried that the story would have been less impactful or not as good if people had guessed it early on. I think this really came down to issues with storyboarding before development. Mike Mood, the lead developer, states that
we'd like to say we knew exactly what was going to happen, but really at the end of the day, we knew the beginning and we knew the end of the game. Everything that happened in between was kind of developed as we went along. Things kind of progressed and changed. Like an example would be in chapter 2, we had a poster of Alice Angel, and that was just one poster off in the corner, whatever, and the fans just started doing fan art. They just fell in love with the character, and there was nothing explaining what this character was.
Yeah.
And at the time, we were getting ready to jump into chapter 3, and it made it really obvious that chapter 3 should be about Alice Angel, right? So.
And it could be that it was difficult to come up with the middle part of that story. After your game becomes a beloved success, I think there's a ton of pressure to make the story exciting and really unique to the fans. And I think that because of that, storytelling can get really murky and confusing sometimes. All in all, I think unless you initially set out to make a game where your community is supposed to help create the story, just don't. Tell the story you want to tell with passion, and we'll love and theorize about it all the same. While fan theories may be impacting these games individually, I think they'll change the indie horror game market, especially with these mascot horror games. All of these wildly popular franchises have a large focus on hiding lore or secrets in their games that many community members theorize about. We've seen it happen time and time again for 10 years now. What makes these games excel in popularity beyond other horror games is definitely the story behind them and how cryptic that story can be. There is a major impact that we, the community, play on the success and popularity of these franchises. I say as long as your game's story has a use for hiding lore for fans to talk about, that's an amazing aspect to add. This trend is definitely continuing in upcoming games. In My Friendly Neighborhood, the developers have included a camera mode even in the demo. I have no doubt that a similar feature will be in the full release, and within that mode they'll hide lore, secret endings, Easter eggs, anything they want really. I believe that this genre will continue to spawn games with cryptic lore in hopes to do what others have done before them. Bring people together to enjoy crafting theories and discussing the games they love. Speaking of hidden lore, another game that is notoriously hiding lore is Poppy Playtime. Developer Mob Games have certainly been under fire as of late, especially for their use of NFTs to hide lore for their games. There are a few troubling signs for the future of this genre when you look at Poppy Playtime honestly. First is the fact that these NFTs exist in a game published on Steam. Valve, the developer of Steam, has banned many games that make use of cryptocurrency or NFTs as of October 2021. It becomes questionable as to if Poppy Playtime is even supposed to be available on the Steam store due to these guidelines. The guidelines read under the What You Shouldn't Publish on Steam: applications built on blockchain technology that issue or allow exchange of cryptocurrencies or NFTs. Now my guess is that because these NFTs are only lore and they're not required to play the game, and to my knowledge are also not promoted anywhere in the game, that Poppy Playtime has not been removed, but that's just my speculation. I personally think these are really ridiculous and a bad idea. Could you imagine if every time Scott wanted to publish FNAF lore outside of the games, it cost you the total price of only part of the game? Plus there are 6 NFTs in this collection, totaling $90 for lore that Mob Games CEO Zach Bellinger stated in his apology on Twitter to be ultimately just Mommy Longlegs is coming. I do respect that he came out and apologized and said how much the fan base means to him and the team, I think it would have been really easy for the company to just not apologize and continue on with the game, especially after Chapter 2's success, regardless of all of the controversies going on. So I want to give them credit for that. He also apologized for other allegations that I won't discuss in this video, but I will link Theft King's videos in the description. Theft King provides 3 great in-depth videos detailing the controversies, the apology, and even an interview with Zach Bellinger, and I recommend you check out all of them if you're interested. Overall, Poppy Playtime has been flamed for having a marketing-first mindset, with many pointing out how early and large-scale merchandise came out, especially targeting young children. Some have even pointed this out for Chapter 3 of Bendy and the Ink Machine. Going into a plushie factory in-game, then a plushie line being sold for real money weeks later. I don't have a problem with games selling merchandise at all. In fact, I love having merchandise and representing games, shows, and companies that I love. I do, however, really hope that marketing merchandise is not the major focus for any of the individuals involved in these games. It makes the communities feel like the developers do not really care about the game, which is never a good thing. FNAF seems to be moving away from this gameplay formula, with a more open world of Security Breach, harkening back to more traditional survival horror. I think this change of direction sort of makes sense. Scott has publicly retired from game development. There are whole teams of developers working on these games now, enabling them to create grander, more complex gameplay than sitting in an office. While I think Scott will always definitely be involved in one way or another, Steelwool has the ability to change FNAF into a more linear, story-driven experience. I personally felt that Security Breach was much more linear than previous FNAF games. You could play through the story, and depending on the ending you got, it made more sense than some of the other FNAF game endings. You were able to easily find out that Vanny is Vanessa and free her from Glitch Trap. While there are still plenty of questions such as the Blob, the Princess Quest minigames, and the audio logs, I feel that these are easier to write off more as side lore or foreshadowing than the main storyline for this game. It took Steelwool even longer than they anticipated to develop this open world gameplay, and I would be surprised to see it go away in the future Five Nights installments. But what does this all mean for future mascot horror games? Clearly, with probably several more Poppy Playtime chapters, the upcoming Hello Neighbor 2 and My Friendly Neighborhood titles, this genre looks to be hanging around for years to come. While some people are saying how tired they are of this genre, I just don't see it going away. With the popularity of Twitch and YouTube ever growing, these games are almost developed to be watched and streamed and not played individually. I think there's just something more entertaining for people when they watch a streamer play a horror game, whether it's a sense of togetherness and not being alone, or just for the entertainment value. To quote Philip Moring, co-founder of Outlast developer Red Barrel Games, "Horror games are so popular on YouTube because seeing somebody being scared is a guilty pleasure. It becomes a combination of horror and humor." Personally, I'm excited to see where this genre goes. I hope all the developers of this genre are able to make exciting, fresh games with creative ideas. I just hope they go into the development process with more planning, a clear end goal for the story they want to tell, and a gameplay-first mindset rather than on marketing. It's honestly worrying how easily these companies can target especially younger audiences with all the merchandising. And while I love merch and being able to support developers beyond playing their games, marketing should be secondary to the game and its fans. To me, indie development is all about passion for creation. Many indie developers work full-time, non-game development jobs and are creating games purely out of love and passion for their projects. While I do believe that these popular developers are very passionate about their games and fans, I want them to be unafraid in making great content that continues to build immersed communities in a positive way. Because, at the end of the day, games are meant to be fun and enjoyable experiences that we can all share together. But what do you guys think? Are these popular indie games heading down the right path, or will this genre burn out and die sooner than expected? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
That is the only thing that matters, and they should never be taken for granted. And who cares if something is commercial, and who cares if something is going to make a whole bunch of money? You just have to make sure that whenever those people finally get to see this next thing, that it's something that lifts them up and makes them happy, and it's something that it was everything that they wanted to see.